She is the best. Ladies and gentlemen, from Westward, Patricia Calhoun joins us, and we put this up earlier in the week with all the Ramsey turmoil again, and this was actually done a while back, but like this isn't the first time that Patty caught hell at Westward. First of all, good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
What happened?
Well, we got lots of comments on a post Michael Roberts had put on the latest word, and it's one he'd actually created a couple of years ago when John Bonet would have turned 16. And as you know, many people are obsessed with John Bonet Ramsey in this whole case and how justice did or didn't go down. And so among the many things people have concocted was someone who did, one of those time analysis photo things and guessed how John Bonet would look through various stages of her life the 10 years after she was murdered.
And now, is it, and the one I looked at, and I don't know if it's the same one.
We put it on Facebook and people said we were very tasteless, I believe.
Well, it's hard to believe.
Certainly a new one. We'd never heard that before.
I've never heard, boy, that Westward is so tasteless. And, of course, no one's ever said, that Peter Boyles guy on the radio, what a tasteless character.
Well, I'm just laughing. I'm looking at your name, which is Alan Prendergast, also wrote about the Ramsey case. We're putting up a post this morning, and Alan had done so much coverage of not just Columbine, but some of the big stories we've had over the last 2 decades, and one was certainly John Bonet Ramsey.
Well, we're having Alan on later in the morning with his piece, Jean Bonet's Parents, How an Indictment Became an Exoneration, which I think should be the theme of everybody covering the story right now, is what happened up there with Alex Hunter and Mary Keenan Lacey and Michael Tracy and all the other people involved in this. And so how these people, and, we were talking about it with Craig and Dan, and Alan, I've read Alan's piece already, and John Bonet's Parents' indictment was so important, we reunited Caplis and Silverman.
I noticed that too. Well, and I almost had to pop a David Kopel one on the air because he was talking about Mary Lacey and what a good job she'd done. I just said 3 words, John Mark Carr. I mean,
please.
And I thought Stan Garnett's piece, if you read that in the Boulder Camera, was really fascinating. But of all things that Mary Keenan Lacey, is that it?
That's
Do I have them in the right order?
I think
that
so.
she did the letter exonerating the parents. It's one thing not to put them on trial, but the exoneration letter, given what the grand jury had determined, was really one of the biggest mysteries of all time.
Stan Garnett is coming on the show in an hour, and
good. You're going to have a good show.
Yeah, he's going to make an appearance. He has already told Casey, he'll. And I like Stan, and I think he's hopefully about to do, as Spike Lee said, the right thing. We'll see, but he is going to come on the radio show this morning at 7. And this harkens back, and I tried to explain this, that I don't know how many people read their book, but I did. And 2 times in the book they claim that the grand jury exonerated them. And the thing that's interesting to me, and I brought this up with Tom Kelly yesterday, and he was in agreement, and Dan and Craig, and people that I respect in this story. And here is Alex Hunter, who knows that at least 2 of the 10 grand jury accounts they wanted to indict them they wanted to indict John and Patsy for murdering their daughter. Having said that,
child abuse resulting in death, right?
Well, but we don't know what the rest of them are. And when it seems to me, and I'm not an attorney, but what seems to me is there's this place here again that the grand jury isn't sure. They know that they did it, but they don't know is who did what. In other words, somebody garroted that little girl. Somebody wrote the note. Somebody staged, as they called it, the crime. Somebody moved the body. Somebody did this. Somebody did that. And they're sure that the 2 of them did it, but they're not sure exactly who did what. Now, I think, and this is what makes some of the people who have written about the story not any good, because they don't know. First of all, Mary Keenan Lacey had no authority to exonerate. She had no authority to exonerate. So anytime I hear Channel 9 talk about that, you know that they're in the tank because you don't have to comment because of Paula Woodward. Having said that, the family uses in their book, on the death of innocence, on 3 occasions in the book, they use the grand jury not indicting them as evidence that they're innocent. Now, I know you well enough that if you knew the truth, and you went through all of that stuff with the Rocky Flats grand jury, which I think is worth comparing. And here's Alex Hunter up in Boulder, and he reads their book. If he hadn't, he's not doing his job. And they say, and then the same thing happens with the worst district attorney in probably U.S. history, Mary Keenan Lacey, and she reads it. And both of them have access to the grand jury indictments, and they don't say a word. In fact, Mary Lacey exonerates them. Wow.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And it is interesting to contrast with the Rocky Flats grand jury, which also wanted to indict individuals.
Oh, you
and
bet.
instead, the Colorado Attorney General just made a deal with them.
Yep. And they made a deal with corporate America and the defense people, right?
Corporate America and the defense people. And let's not forget that Rocky Flats, Rockwell International, had the same attorneys as the Ramseys.
That's right. Hal Haddon, right?
Mm-hmm. Hal Haddon did that. That firm did the same both cases.
He is. I tell you what. I mean, the devil his due. He's got El Turkey too. You know that.
Yeah.
And
he's definitely a good attorney. Let's just say that.
Well, that's the great Mark Twain line. You know, what's a jury? A jury is the 12 people put together to determine who has the better lawyer. And Hal Haddon's. I mean, I'm telling you what, man. The guy's the gray eminence. You know, he is always involved in the back of something. And he's got El Turkey. He's got John and Patsy. You know, and Lynn Wood I don't think Lynn Wood is running around threatening people anymore.
I certainly haven't heard anything from Lynn Wood lately.
No, he's, you know, in fact, I saw him on TV, carefully coiffed hair. He's the werewolf of London, but I think his days of threatening people have come to a close as well. And all the people who jumped on, remember Team Ramsey, and remember we did that Ramsey Mountain News, and you know, this is stuff that Ellen is so good at. And you kind of see now where the rubber meets the road, and it's kind of beauty to watch.
Yeah, it's been just amazing after all these years, and good for Charlie Brennan to continue on.
You bet.
For Tom
Kelly.
Tom Kelly to take that case pro bono. That's exactly what journalists should be doing, and that's exactly what journalistic organizations should be doing.
And Kelly, Tom was on a radio show yesterday, and you know he's got me out of a couple of jams, and he's just the best. And I said to him, I said I think she should be disbarred, and he said I can't argue, you know, that she marry Keenan Lacey, and I still think, you know, how Michael Tracy keeps a job at CU is beyond my powers, and Alex Hunter, and all of these people. I mean, the people in the media that climbed in bed with them, and it was. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, certainly when you have Alan on, have him talk about Michael Tracy, because that's fascinating, and that the Denver Post story was quoting him.
Yeah, twice. John Ingold, not once but twice. I said that's like asking Adolf Hitler about the Holocaust. Asking Michael Tracy about the Ramseys.
Well, more than anything else, as I said, good for Charlie Brennan, good for Tom Kelly, but at least we now know this much, that people can read some of those documents and make decisions for themselves.
And in the Michael Tracy, Ingold not only quotes him once but twice, and I loved it when they were talking about the indictment was coming, and Michael Tracy says, I don't know what this means. Michael, it's pretty simple. It means more people will find out what a stooge you are. I mean, that guy's despicable, but you know, it's a whole cabal of despicable people. And the story, I don't think, is ever written clear. By the way, I'm reading all this stuff on Norman Mailer again. You know who Mailer's colleague was in a lot of his writing? Lawrence Schiller.
No.
Lawrence Schiller.
Really?
The guy who wrote Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. He turns up in all of these really interesting places. I mean, Schiller's an interesting guy.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
No, I had no idea. And of course, that was one where Charlie Brennan did a lot of the work and maybe didn't get enough of the credit.
Got none of the credit. I mean, it was only time Schiller ever gave Charlie credit was when he appeared with me, because other than that, he would go nowhere. He would not talk about Charlie's work. And you know, the book came out, Perfect Murder, Perfect Town. We all read it. Then we all some of us read the Ramsey's book, Death of Innocence. And in there, on 3 occasions, John Ramsey is claiming that the grand jury exonerated them or voted them innocent. And I'm thinking, you know, now John Ramsey's unavailable for comment, and Lynn Wood is just barking at the moon, and Alex Hunter's gone to ground, and I don't know where Mary Keenan Lacey is. I think she's probably at home sleeping with a baggie of her native soil. I don't know where these people are.
Well, it's interesting because they have been obsessed with this case. Obviously, that's the post we put. If people didn't want to look at it, they don't have to. I mean, you find people who come up who are have cult theories and everything else that came out of the Aurora shooting. It's amazing how people get so embroiled in these cases and wanting every nuance. I'm trying to remember I can't remember one of the crazy John Benet Ramsey people, but this is not just a story about a little beauty queen, which people criticize, say that no one would have followed it that much if it hadn't been this little white beauty queen. It's about justice and the lack thereof in Boulder and how Boulder politics worked.
I was one of the guys that felt that was true. That one of the things, and we learned it in the Aaron A. Thompson case, and the similarities in those stories, including names and the rest of it. Aaron A. Jean Benet, Aaron Thompson, John Bennett Ramsey, how they made up names for the little girl, and then she disappears into the house. But the Aurora PD showed you how to do an investigation. And when they nailed Shelley Lowe and Aaron Thompson for the murder of that little girl, at the same time, Boulder showed you exactly what not to do. And the Ramseys, of course, skated away. Not for long, as it's almost Shakespearean, it will out. But back to what you guys did, you're absolutely right. We put it up on our website, 710 KNUS, the so-called aging of Jean Benet. And I think it's perfectly legit. You don't have to look at it. If you don't want to look at it, don't look at it, right?
Right. And it's something, as I said, we didn't do it because, frankly, we would never have taken the time. Someone else did it. And we said, this is what one of the many, many followers of this case have done. So, yeah, if you don't want to look at it, don't. But certainly, this case is not over yet. Yeah. So I think it's absolutely that people would still be fascinated by it is no surprise.
I agree. And, we were talking, Craig and Dan have reunited, and so many different people are showing back up. I had a big, long talk with Carol McKinley. We talk all the time. And the people that showed up in this thing, remember J.T. Colfax?
Oh, sure. I still hear from J.T. He's around.
I do, too. And J.T. Colfax drove, as he called it, the meat wagon, and he moved bodies around for morgues and funeral homes.
Right, and didn't he steal the morgue sheets on her body being delivered?
Yes, yes, he did. And then the other guy that showed up, and he was the guy that the Boulder Police Department was so bizarre that their crime scene photos were developed by 1 Hour Photo. Remember that?
Yep.
And that guy
and remember Santa, who got in trouble? They pointed the finger at Santa.
Santa Claus McWilliams lived across the street and wedged himself into it was a Today Show, I think, and ended up on the Today Show sort of in this bizarre moment where he was waving in the window, and they said, "Oh, it's Santa." He said, "Oh, I'm the guy that knew the Ramseys." And they ran.
Oh, that's right.
They ran him in and sat him down. They lit up the set, and he was so loony. Santa Claus McReynolds. And then there was like the crazy housekeeper lady that when Thomas and those guys go out there because Patsy fingers her, and they go out to her mobile home, and she answers the door in Patsy's shoes.
The cast, the characters are so incredible, and the fact that this got international attention. I mean, it is a homegrown story. It is a story about Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, absolutely.
It went global.
Remember Pasta J. Alowski?
Yeah, who took after the reporter with the baseball bat?
Chase Lee Frank with a ball bat. And they never prosecuted Pasta J for threatening. It was like he was buddies, and now we know that the Ramseys were hiding out at Pasta J's, and he was John Ramsey's partner or John Ramsey invested in Pasta J's, and that's where all the CU football players came in and ate for free, and then you saw Pasta J on the sidelines of a CU game. I mean, it was so interwoven. I mean, and we were driving up there and living up there. I mean, we used to make jokes that I could drive a cab in Boulder. I mean, it was like you go up there every day because there was an adventure up there every day. But I remember all of those crazy people.
The characters that just kept coming out.
And every time, like McKinley and I were talking about it, and I said, and plus at the same time, we're all working in the execution of Gary Davis. I mean, imagine all the stuff. It seemed like triple witching. And remember the guy flew the airplane into the mountain, and they could never find the ordnance. He was in like an A-10 or something. And remember that?
Right.
And I mean, it was like every lunatic thing was happening at once.
And they never stop. And you kind of wonder, is it something in our air? Is it something in our water?
Yeah.
Or does every story go so big time just because whatever media people still exist in the world and have expense accounts want to come out and have a free ski vacation and cover a story in Colorado?
And then all those tabloid people showed up, and my son and I we have our family breakfast and our family dinners, and Morgan was this kid, and they're because I was taken and shown the ransom note, and I still can't talk about that, but I was shown the ransom note. So I said I'd seen it. And then those guys showed up from the tabloids, and they offered my ex-wife the biggest diamond she could ever want if I would just get that note. And they were remember they were trying to buy the note. And one of the few times in my life I've been smart enough to say stay away. Well, because it was said, then we had a and then that guy went up, and they went up to Evergreen to that guy's place and tried to buy the note.
Right, and then they wound up, he got charged.
Well, none of that. So they come to my house, and my son answers the door, and I was skiing, and they gave him the subpoena. This is a true story. And so
I'm not sure that's exactly a legal service, is it?
No. So we ended up, and here's my son and we're going to Golden, because we got subpoenaed in that story. And he's like he's a kid, and we're driving out to. He said, "Dad, what's going to happen to me?" And I'm going, "Well, you're going to prison, And he's like, "Oh no!" And I said, but we went out, and then I took the press shield. I said, "No, I can't tell you who did that." And they say, "Are you invoking the shield?" They were yelling at me, and I said, "Yeah, I'm invoking the shield. What about your son?" I said, "My son didn't see the note." It was such a crazy time. Remember, they went after all those tabloid guys were here, and you wrote about it.
They got charged because I wound up as being an expert witness.
I remember that.
Because on whether or not it was ethical to buy to buy the ransom note, because the National Enquirer had paid money for it. Was it the Globe or the National Enquirer? But the fact is, people leak documents all the time. Sometimes they leak documents because they get money. Yeah. Sometimes they leak documents just because they want to see justice get done.
Absolutely. I remember the guy, and I won't tell you who, because I remember we're sitting in some place having lunch, and I said, "Have you guys ever done this before?" And that Australian guy said, "You're looking at the guy, mate, who bought Nicole Brown Simpson's diary." Remember that? When Ron, what was his name? Ron Brown sold.
Ron Gold?
He sold.
Oh, yeah.
He sold his dead daughter's diary to the Enquirer. Remember that? And they printed her diary. And remember, you were the one, I think you did a great criticism. The Denver Post, the Enquirer put the little girl's hand because they stole the pictures from the 1 hour photo. That guy was drunk and sold the photos. And then the Denver Post said they ran the cover of the Enquirer but said we wouldn't do this. And you did a great story on that.
Well, I just thought that photo of her hand, suddenly it put everything in perspective, which was, this was not an iconic, mythic beauty queen. This was a little girl who wasn't taken care of. Something happened to that little girl, and someone needs to be held responsible.
And now we know.
And you just look at that, and that's what it was, that innocence. The photo did say more than 1,000 words.
Oh, but I remember the Post refused to. I mean, all of a sudden these people were taking the moral high ground. I remember that, and you scoffed, and you did a really good piece on that. And this shows that she's actually a human. And one more question. Kaplis and I have kicked this around, and Silverman and I have kicked this around. There seemed to be an endless supply of performing JonBenet video. Remember how seemingly every other day there was she was a cowgirl, she was on a float, she was a Valentine, she was all these different things. And we always try to figure who was feeding those tapes, who was feeding those show bits. I mean, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah, and is it our parents leaking it, our friends of parents leaking it, or the people in the pageant industry?
I remember we got kicked out of a pageant. We went to see a pageant at the Merchandise Mart, and they figured out who I was, and they threw me out.
Well, that might have happened with or without JonBenet.
I was going to say, you think this is the first time I've been thrown out of some place? God, what a time. Well, it's excellent. Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Oh, no, and here it is again. So anyway, Alan's story is going up on westward.com in about half an hour. And if you want to look at what one guy did, aging JonBenet 10 years, that's on too.
Well, we put both of those up on our website, 710knus.com, and they put the aging of JonBenet up, and we have Pendergast's most recent piece. I'll give you a call this afternoon. Thanks, pal.
Right.
Patty Calhoun. I actually was thinking about calling him and asking him to be on the show back 1,000 years ago. And if you do this, Casey, because Don and I own this, and it's called Media Horror Productions. And we have it up on the website. We have all the songs from the day. This is one of the most talented men I've ever had the opportunity to know and be around. And 1,000 years ago. First of all, Donnie, good morning.
Hey, Peter, how the heck are you?
Well,
It's kind of nostalgic.
Yeah, I was thinking, honest to God, last night. I'm reading, and I'm thinking I'm going to call Donnie and see if he wants to do a radio show with me, like we did in the old days. Now, this guy lives in Boulder, talented writer, lyricist, idea guy, musician, bon vivant, mad bomber, rock on tour, cattle thief. He's everything. He's just a wonderful, wonderful guy.
Your partner in rhyme.
That's right. And when did we hook up?
Oh, it was probably March of '97, so it was relatively soon after the incident. And for 2 years going, we did songs. You would generally call me up on a weekend and screw my weekend up with a great idea, or you call them brain farts.
Yeah.
And last night I was thinking too, man. It's a great minds flush the same toilet, and I put all of our songs up at MediaWhore.com if people want to go see them, and it's quite a collection.
I would like to do this case because I was thinking about doing this with Donnie. There ain't no we. I don't got a rat in my pocket. He would make these incredible songs, and they were parodies of everybody in Boulder. And one of my favorite ones we ever did. See if you can find Paula.
I figured you'd go to that one.
Well, you got to now. But...
yeah, it was number 14 out of 15 songs, I think, that are up there. But what it amounted to was I dug out my books when the indictment came out. And I can't say enough about the respect I have for Charlie Brennan.
Oh, man.
And the money that the Daily Camera put behind this investigation, even though they aren't a party to the case, they have given Charlie a lot of support. And after years of writing annoying letters to the editor and lots of comments on the online forum, they've invited me to be a regular contributor. And I hope that this Saturday our assignment has something to do with this case. It's kind of a sad anniversary, really. It would come around every year or two, but nothing like this. This is a blockbuster, and it's due to Charlie's great work.
Charlie is. We were talking about him with Miss Calhoun about. I think I think Larry Schiller kind of jobbed Charlie, but all things aside, Garnett, who's coming up on the radio show here in a half an hour, the Boulder DA, he made a remarkable. I think someday we'll know the inner workings of these moments with Garnett and Tom Kelly and.
Well, Garnett's being really careful. God love him for coming on. He's being really careful because he has political aspirations beyond being the Boulder DA. But he did the right thing in this case, and he did it very carefully.
I told everybody we're talking about that. One of the legends of American politics is Tom Dewey, the district attorney in New York City, who he got a couple of big criminals, including what was his? Come on, Peter, the killer, Lepke. They got Lepke, and he went after crime people, and he ended up running for president. Remember the famous Truman, Dewey beats Truman, and he ran against Harry Truman. But he started out, and another one would be the former mayor of New York. Come on, and he started out prosecuting John Gotti, becomes mayor, and then he runs for Mayor Giuliani.
Well, I think what kept this case alive is that people had an innate sense of outrage that justice wasn't done, and things were fairly obvious on their face. And you took a lot of heat for it, and the attacks that you suffered in the press. You were very proactive about it. You placed that ad in the Daily Camera about the slow-speed Bronco chase. I mean, you were right out front with it, and you put your neck on the line. And I think that for good or ill, until now, I mean, you have a phrase that you say, truth will out.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm thinking maybe in my lifetime, man. And in this case, I think it's gotten closer to it.
Well, none of them, and I want to play this. We'll give an idea, a taste of the talent of Don Reggae. Can you hold through this one?
Sure.
And Don's on hold. Now, this is Don's voice. If you remember, at the time, Paula Woodward was probably, when it comes to television, the biggest suck-up to the Ramseys that you can imagine. And to this day, Channel 9 does really bad, almost one-sided reporting. They couldn't help but do this and then say, always in the end of their reports, how the District Attorney Mary Lacey exonerated. They jumped into bed with Michael Tracy. They tried to do a couple of ambush interviews with me, and they're just too weak. It's a very weak operation. But the worst of the worst was probably Paula Woodward. And so at the time, they all were gathered up in Boulder, and they were all kissing the Ramseys' rear ends. And I said, no, we can't do this. And so, ladies and gentlemen, this is the voice of Don Reggae. Peter Boyle's Don Reggae Media Horror Productions present. If you've never heard it before, this is aimed directly at Paula Woodward. But we named some other reporters in this as well, including Lisa Levitt Reichman, who later Donnie and I do a show, a tune called Lisa with the Two Last Names. So without further ado, and you can have all of these are yours. Ladies and gentlemen, Paula, the brown-nosed reporter.
There was Charlie and Philip and Lisa L. Reichman, Benny and Bertha and Sherry Keene Osborne. But can you recall the most shameless suck-up of all? All of the Ramsey lapdog had a very big brown nose. After you watch her interview, you would even say it grows. All of the other journalists used to think she had some class. Now they just get embarrassed as she kisses Ramsey's ass. Late one foggy Christmas night, the young life met an end. Paula disregards the facts to suck up to her friend. Oh, how the public hates this as they shout out angrily.
That's one. And that was, of course, that's Donnie's voice, Don Reggae.
That was done around Christmas time.
Yes, it was.
And you were up here at some symposium on the case. But it was really kind of big noise, and as Patsy Calhoun said, it went global.
Oh.
And even Spence Havlick, former.
What is of all the tunes that we did? We did how many tunes did we do, Donnie?
We did 15, but the 14 are at MediaHorror.com. Not only that, the audience participation show, which you mentioned, Lisa with the two last names.
Yeah.
The audience participation show is my favorite because your audience is incredibly creative. And by the way, not to digress too much, but congratulations on the success of your new show, man.
Oh, thank you so much.
And then we had a 10th anniversary show that we did in 2007,
right.
which was kind of compendium. And so there's 14 of them up there, and I think the most recent one was Michael Roll Your Load Some More. That was your idea about Michael Tracy.
And Michael Tracy, who, for the life of me, I mean,
he groomed John Markard.
Of course he did. Like he groomed him like a child molester.
And the way I got into this was listening to you every morning, and you were like a bulldog on the ankle of this case, and you wouldn't let go of it. And all I had to do was listen carefully. And you were you had all sorts of sources on the street who were feeding you information behind the scenes, and this would kind of come out in your show every morning, and all I did was make it rhyme. Oh. And I chose some oldies because they were familiar to people. And it just kept going on, and I couldn't believe we went for 2 years on this stuff. And
now it's back.
Now it's back.
And the thing that Don Reggae, Peter Boyles, we were and we are Media Horror Productions. And it came from somebody calling somebody a media whore. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. Let's make it a media whore production.
My girlfriend accused me of being a media whore because I enjoyed seeing my name in the paper.
Well, and who isn't?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. And we did these tunes. Let's see, there was... there was only in Boulder, the Roy Orbison takeoff, the Grand Jury, the Ramseys, which was based on Don't Worry, Be Happy. Or Big Bad John, which was, in my opinion, Jimmy Dean did the first rap song. And let's do that. Look for this is about John Ramsey, and we did Big Bad John. We did the first one was Werewolf of Boulder. Werewolf of Boulder, because you had played that coming out of a commercial break. We used to play Porky Pig, going a bitty all that. We did that. Oh yeah, every time you would mention Boulder, you would do When the Merry-Go-Round Breaks Down. All right, I'll put you on hold. Here we go. This is Werewolf of Boulder. This was the first one. Don Reggae, Peter Boyle's Media Horror presents Werewolf of Boulder.
I saw a werewolf with an Italian menu in his hand, walking down Boulder's Pearl Street Mall. He was looking for a place called Pasta J's. Gonna get himself some spaghetti and meatballs.
Sing along.
Ah, ooh, werewolf of Boulder. Ah, ooh. Ah, ooh, werewolf of Boulder. Ah, ooh.
Love
If you hear him walking around outside your house in the snow,
Werewolf of Boulder
he
again.
won't leave no prints.
Diddley Prince.
Little beauty pageant queen got strangled late last night. Werewolf of Boulder again.
Donnie and Peter, man. Awoo! Wednesday, October 30th. It is 6:38. The Man with a Plan is on the air with Peter Boyle's Don Reggae, Media Horror Productions. And again, Stan Garnett's coming up, and it's absolutely brilliant. And we have Alan Pendergast is on the show this morning, a new piece that's dropping in Westward. Jean Bonnet's parents' how an indictment became an exoneration. And I've tried, thankfully, because I don't have a life, I'm able to read a lot of this stuff. And I brought this up, and yesterday when Tom Kelly was with us, who is the lawyer who did all of this pro bono, and Tommy didn't know about the Ramseys in their own book, because who was going to read their book except for me and a bunch of people that they duped? But they did a book called Death of Innocence, and they got a Christian publishing house to publish it because they were professing their Christianity. But long story short, I read you from page 357. This is John. The battered justice system had creaked and shuddered, but it had worked. We had not been indicted. People would have to finally see the grand jury's decision as our vindication. Whatever time has been lost with the grand jury must be made up quickly. Page 359. After looking at all the evidence, or lack of it, a jury of our peers had not indicted Patsy and me. It seems the system had functioned as our Constitution intended. We are truly grateful. Now, you got to...
You just put me off my breakfast.
Well, my point is, they wrote that stuff. They said that stuff. Alex Hunter sat there with his finger in his ear. Mary Tracy Lacey saw it. Michael Tracy, I don't think he was... Well, who knows what Mary Keenan Lacey showed him. But as I'm saying, these people sat there letting the Ramseys make those claims and knowing damn well... Donnie, can you stay through a break?
You bet.
All right, Don enough to be with us. He is the man, ladies and gentlemen, the talented Don Reggae, along with Peter Boyle's, the other one-fourth versus Reggae's three-fourths of Media Horror Productions that was in effect for a number of years, and we kind of lived off of Boulder, although we did other songs, parody songs on other people, but principally it was the Ramseys. And given what has happened, just really since Friday when those 18 pages drop, and it's clear that the grand jury wanted to indict the Ramseys for the murder of their daughter.
Well, there were a lot of charges. We only got to see four of
right.
them, but it pointed directly at the parents.
Sure.
And strangely enough, it just made the mystery a little bit odder because the indictments as they were written almost was like an aiding and abetting, that you allowed this to happen and you know who did it. But it could be either one of them, or it could be another family member. And
no.
You know what? I know you have your. You talked about belief and knowledge, and it's hard to have knowledge in this case, but it's hard to argue that Patsy did not write the note because it certainly looks like she did. So if there's any knowledge to be had, you start there and you work out. And it's odd that John would and Lynn Wood, his spokesperson and lawyer,
mouthpiece,
would say we just want all of the evidence that was presented to the grand jury to be released. Well, of course they do, because they polluted the process with Lou Schmidt and everything else. But if anybody's interested, hell, I'm looking at. I went down to the basement and got out of the archive. I have 8 books on this damn case.
Oh yeah,
and there's plenty of stuff if people want to get behind it. I'm particularly fond of Steve Thomas's book.
I am as well.
Jean Monnet Inside the Ramsey Murder Investigation. But you know, he points at Patsy. There's another book that that points elsewhere called Foreign Faction, which is relatively recent. And, of course, there's Schiller's book. Then there's one called A Mother Gone Bad, but it's essentially points to John, and I don't think that any of the law enforcement people ever really felt that John was the principal perpetrator. So it's an ongoing mystery, but it's just got a little bit sharper focus with these indictments, and it flies in the face of everything that the Ramseys have tried to put out there in her lifetime and in his ongoing life. As you said, he wakes up next to his
new wife.
She's sleeping one eye. What must she think?
Yeah, she's sleeping one eye open.
Yeah.
What song would you like to go out on, boss?
How about, well, heck, we can hit Michael Tracy.
Michael Row the Load Ashore?
Yeah, this number one on the list.
Number one on your hit parade.
With a bullet.
18 with a bullet.
Why does he still have a job?
Well, he's one of the only guys that Ward Churchill could carry his
job.
Well,
we did 2 songs about Ward Churchill, not to go there, but my gosh, this guy is the antithesis of everything he's supposed to be teaching kids to be.
Doesn't matter. Not in Boulder, brother. Not in Boulder.
Telling me.
All right, I love you. I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right.
Thanks, Donnie.
All right.
We'll go to the break. This is about Michael Tracy. Row your load ashore.
Michael, roll your load some more. Michael Tracy, pitch your book, you media whore. Michael Tracy, did you dot your I's and cross your T's? Mary Lacy, or were you too eager for a guilty plea? Mary Lacy, mainstream media has some nerve. Are you crazy? All they caught was a delusional perv. They're all lazy, trading emails with a kook. Michael Tracy, watch this